Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be sharing a story of personal failure and also talking about some more camping and canoeing related questions that we get often, and also talking about another kind of controversial topic. So feel free to grab yourself a beverage, pull up a chair, and let's hang out for a little bit. So I was recently watching one of Marty Morissette's videos on YouTube about his attempt to climb Mount Washington and failing at his first attempt. And I thought to myself, hey, I too have attempted to climb Mount Washington and failed miserably. And I thought, I've never shared this with a vlog before. I'm gonna do it today. And so Marty, thanks for the inspiration. It feels funny to talk about inspiration when we're talking about failure, but if Marty can share his, I should share mine as well. I'm going to link to Marty's video down below if you'd like to check it out. Be sure to send him some love. And yeah, climbing Mount Washington is something that I've wanted to do for a very long time, and I wanted to solo climb Mount Washington. For those who don't know, it is one of the coldest, windiest places in North America. The wind chill is just off the charts cold. A lot of companies go up there to test their gear sometimes because it just gets hammered by wind. And it's a serious hill. There are avalanches up there. You have to be really careful about where you climb, and sometimes you have to bring crampons and rope and ice axes. So it's not a walk in the park. It's by no means, it's not an epic climb, but it's a difficult climb. People do climb Mount Washington very often, but if you're going to be doing it yourself, you have to be safe out there, and the weather can turn very, very quickly. So a lot of consideration goes into when to climb it, and you always have to be on top of the avalanche conditions. The other really cool thing about Mount Washington is you can actually ski down it. You can go down Tuckerman's Ravine, which is where the avalanche concern is. And there's a ski trail at the bottom of the ravine that then goes down through the forest and down through the rest of the mountain, takes you all the way down to the bottom. And so if we're looking at a Venn diagram of things that Chris really enjoys doing and considers herself pretty decent at doing, we've got scrambling up mountains on the one side and downhill skiing on the other. I come from a downhill ski racing background, so to me, ski touring up the mountain, trying to ski tour up for the first time, seems like a good idea. You can hinge the toe and be able to hike up the mountain with skins underneath the skis that give you added traction as you're going up, and then you can take the skins off the skis and ski down as you normally would. And so again, it seems like a perfectly logical decision for me to do, having never ski toured before. Now, a little bit of foreshadowing. There's a saying in the triathlon community and the Ironman triathlon community in specific that says, nothing new on race day. And what they mean by that is you should have all your gear completely dialed in before the day when everything needs to perform as it should. So it's now December 2018. I've done all my research. I found a place to rent the gear, and Julia is 8 months pregnant, and so it seems like a great idea to go climbing before the baby comes. That way I'll be able to, spend the rest of the winter with Julia, and yeah, let's just get this climbing Mount Washington thing out of the way, right? And so mid-December, I began looking for a window of opportunity to climb the mountain, and sure enough, looking ahead, December 23rd seems like a really good time to climb the mountain. The avalanche concerns are down. It seems like the weather is going to be a little bit better. So I get in the car on December 22nd, the night of December 22nd, and I drive 7 hours through the night, leaving town here at 8 o'clock at night and not arriving until very, very early in the morning I managed to sleep a few hours in the car. I was bundled up in the back of our little tiny Honda Fit at the time. And even though I was freezing my butt off, I was really happy because I was finally making it all happen. I brought all my film gear. I was going to film this thing. I went to the rental place. I picked up my gear. It ended up taking a little bit longer to get a rundown on how to make everything work. But you know what? Still going to make this thing happen. I then go back to the mountain and I'm about to purchase my permit. And lo and behold, for some weird reason, they weren't taking credit cards. And then I had to go use an ATM down the road. So I had to jump in the car and drive down the road to a local ski hill where I was able to use an ATM and withdraw some money and then go back to the hill and purchase this permit. And I'm trying to figure out where the trailhead is. So all these little tiny things that I have to do before I get onto the mountain are eating away at the amount of time that I have, but I am so stoked and amped just to be there. I finally get on the mountain and the avalanche conditions look good. The weather looks decent, but you know what? I'm there, having a blast. Can't tell you how happy I was to finally be going up the mountain. And as I climb, I'm noticing that I'm beginning to expend a little more energy than I would have expected if I had just hiked up the mountain. And that's naturally because you're hauling the ski touring gear up the mountain with you. But I figure, you know what, this is going to save me a lot of time going down the mountain later on. So even though I'm getting a little warm now, it's okay because by the time I get up to the top, I'm just going to be able to pop the skis back into the regular ski position and just ski right on down. And as I make my way up the mountain, I'm seeing lots of really beautiful sights. I'm taking in the view. I'm filming beautiful ravines, the streams, and the skis and the experience, and I'm having a blast. With all that said, as I'm going up the mountain, I'm beginning to notice that my rate of ascent is not as quick as I had hoped it would be. What I mean by that is the conditions weren't the greatest. There had been a thaw about a week or two before and then a refreeze. And so I was actually climbing up over a lot of ice on the ski touring skis, which isn't the greatest to climb on with ski touring skis. Every now and then I was slipping while I was trying to find traction going up the hill. I probably should have just hiked up the hill. It would have been faster. And I'm also generating more body heat than I should be because I'm not paying as much attention to taking off or removing layers as I probably should have been as I'm going up the mountain for the first time with ski touring skis and bindings and boots. And at the same time, it's getting later in the day. The temperature is starting to drop. It's starting to get more windy. And I'm starting to feel uncomfortable, that uncomfortable feeling you get when the sun's starting to go down. It's starting to get cold, you're kind of sweaty, and you're beginning to feel like all the little decisions you've made up until then aren't panning out in the way that you'd hoped they would. And the sun is getting lower in the sky. It's going to be setting on the other side of the mountain. I'm going to lose the sunlight very soon, and it's going to get even colder. I'm looking at the top of the ravine and I can see these wisps of wind just kicking off the top. And at the same time, it's also been about an hour since I've seen anybody. It's getting really close to the holiday season, and I felt like there were less people out there because of that. And even though I had seen a number of people around on the mountain earlier in the day, the number of people seemed to be really dwindling, which is beginning to concern me. And the last few people that I had seen were actually on their way down the mountain as I'm going up the mountain. And looking ahead, it looks like by the time I get to the top, if I keep going, it's going to be very dark by the time I get up there. The margin for error is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And even though I'm pretty confident that if I push onwards, I can get to the top, I have a headlamp with me. Even if I can get to the top, which I'm pretty sure I can do, it's going to mean coming down in the dark, which means I'm going to have to ski down with a headlamp on, which I've done from time to time, but again, the ski equipment is new to me. I'm new to the area. I don't fully know my way around. And yeah, it's starting to feel like a really bad idea. And I think whenever the margin for error gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're beginning to notice that a series of decisions are culminating in a far less than optimal way of doing it, that's when you need to have a really serious conversation with yourself. I feel like I can get up there, but coming back down is starting to feel like a really big question mark. And with that in mind, I began thinking about Julia. I began thinking about the baby that was on the way. And at that stage, when the margin of error was that thin, I said, you know what? It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. And I'm just going to come home because it seems like the safe thing to do. I put my headlamp on and I put the skis into the normal skiing position, and I began making my way down the ski trail through the forest. And I am so glad that I skied down the mountain at that particular time because, unbeknownst to me, the ski trail ended up being some of the worst skiing conditions that I think I've ever skied on before. Some of the gnarliest sections of just boilerplate ice, many sections of exposed rock where you had to, at the last section, just as you're seeing it with your headlamp, you'd have to stop, take off the skis, walk across, put your skis back on. Again, I come from a ski racing background. I've been skiing since the age of 3. I feel incredibly comfortable and confident on skis. I hardly ever fall on skis. Going down that run that day, again, terrible conditions, and I took 2 really good falls, one of which really jammed my wrist and made it really challenging to ski down the rest of the way after that. And what I became really aware of in that moment was if anything had happened to me further up on the mountain and I had to come down all these sections in even darker conditions, or after potentially injuring myself or being in a bad situation further up on the mountain, like that would have made skiing down the run even more challenging. And so I was just really thankful that I came down when I did, because it would have been really unsafe coming down there even later at night completely by myself. And I think it's really important to share experiences like these from time to time because, it's really tempting to push sometimes when you've put a lot of time and resources into doing something like this. You think to yourself, I've come all this way. I should just push on, go all the way up there. But in reality, when the margin for error keeps getting chiseled away and you're in a new place and you're using new gear and there are very few people around, that's a really good time to start questioning whether or not you should continue on, and probably a good time to turn around and come back. After a much longer than anticipated run down the mountain, I finally made it back to the car. I was able to return all the rental gear that night, which I was really thankful to be able to do, and began the long drive home that night, back home, and essentially ended up driving well into the morning on Christmas Eve. And I can remember being in the car, driving through the night that night, just thinking, I'm so happy to be driving back home to Julia and our little baby on the way. And sure enough, babysitter ended up coming earlier than anticipated. Came on the 29th, about 5 days later. And one of the happiest moments of my life. So yeah, I think it's really important to hear stories like these every now and then, because not everything we do goes according to plan, and having heard Marty's story makes it easier for me to share my story. And there are takeaways and things that we can learn from each other's experiences out there. And it's important to share our defeats and our failures and the things that we don't consider successes as well. Sometimes even more so than our successes, because there are things that we can all take away and all learn from. And so yeah, I hope you've enjoyed hearing my tale of failure and misadventure on Mount Washington. And that mountain will always be there for me to climb at some point in the future, when I have more time and when it can be done safer, and when the margin for error isn't as small. And so, yeah, it's important to know when to turn back. And I'm glad I did. And I hope in some small way it helps somebody else share their experience. So, yeah. In any event, before we get on with the rest of the video and the Q&A about backcountry camping and paddling and some other topics, we had to take a moment to thank the awesome folks over at Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. You can explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity there. They have a tremendous range of interesting classes on topics from film and video production, to marketing and productivity, to music production, fine arts, animation, graphic design, photography. And I've been taking a class by Thomas Frank, who teaches a class on productivity specifically for creatives. And as I mentioned before, he's really good at lowering the activation energy required to get into the creative swing of things. But what I also find valuable is Thomas shows you how to use constraints to fuel your productivity. And if you want to know more about how he does that, I would highly recommend checking out his course. And it's curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads and they're always launching new premium classes, so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. And it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. However, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click on the link in the description will get a free trial of their premium membership, so you can explore your creativity and give it a shot at no cost to you. So again, clicking on that link in the description really does help out the channel. I'd appreciate it if you could take a look. And a huge thanks to the folks at Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. And without further ado, back to the video. Okay, so our first question comes to us from Paul over on Patreon. And hey Paul, he wants to know, any plans for canoe trips outside of Algonquin? If so, what places do you have in mind? Killarney, Wabakimi, Temagami are all very high up on our list. We will absolutely make it to those parks at some point in the future. And I think what ends up happening is every year when spring rolls around and you're just itching to go backcountry camping, Algonquin Park is so near and dear to our hearts that it feels like a homecoming. And we just really want to reconnect with that. The park feels so big that it feels like you could spend a lifetime exploring that park. We love to see what's around the corner, and so that keeps us going back every year. And so that's just our regular go-to every year. And our plan was to more or less do 3 filming trips a year, and we would do 1 backcountry trip in Algonquin Park with just Julie and I. Last year it was the Minas Link. And then we planned on doing a backcountry trip with Cedar so that we could say that he's been backcountry camping every year of his life. And we did do that trip as well. It turned out to be a wonderful trip. And then we would also do a 3rd trip to somewhere new. So that keeps us exploring other places. But 2020 was kind of crazy, and I sort of feel like 2021 is also going to be a little crazy as well. But with all that said, we will explore new places. Okay, so our next question comes to us from Ricky over on Patreon. Hey Ricky, and she wants to know, any training tips on how to get fit enough to flip a canoe overhead and portage it, especially for a petite female? It has always been a goal of mine, but I have no physical strength to speak of. Are there any exercises I can do at home to prepare? So this is a great question, and A lot of lifting and lowering a boat is very dependent on technique. Now, it is also important to build some functional fitness into your arms and have some reserve strength in case things aren't going quite as smoothly as you hoped or you don't have the technique down yet. Now, the other thing that I would really highly recommend doing is seeking out some one-on-one instruction from somebody who's experienced. So somebody who can guide you as the canoe is going up into the air, so that it, hopefully doesn't come crashing down on you and you can practice that technique. I would recommend training with somebody like, for instance, Tori Baird. Tori Baird runs a fantastic clinic for women. It's called Paddle Like a Girl. I'm going to link to it down below. Tori's doing awesome things out there, so I would highly recommend checking her out. And another person to watch in terms of technique, if you can't go to a clinic, might be to watch Kevin Callan's technique video on how to lift a canoe. I'm going to link to that down below as well. And somebody else who would be great to learn from is Camper Christina. She actually just released a camping guide, and I think she's got some great advice in there. I will say Julie and I are both about 5'6" and 120 pounds. And when we lift a canoe, and I should mention, sometimes the style that you see us doing isn't the style that we would use on a regular basis out in the backcountry. For example, the style that I used in the Canoe Flip Challenge was it's almost like you choke up on a baseball bat on one side of the canoe and then you flip it. It's a style that you'll see on Canoe Lake frequently at the Portage store from the people who work there. They flip those canoes really, really quickly. And so that's one style, but it's definitely not the style that you use in the backcountry. I do see a lot of people trying to muscle up the canoe with their upper body strength and their arms, and that taxes out their arms, when in reality I think it's just easier to get the boat up when you pop the boat off the thigh to get it moving, to get the momentum transferring in the upward direction, and then the arms really more or less guide the canoe into where it needs to go, and then it settles on your shoulders. And then for getting the boat down, I kind of like to squat a little bit and then pop the boat off my shoulders and then let the arms guide it down, and then lean back a little bit and let the boat rest on your thighs again. Please do it with the help of somebody else who can guide you, and I hope that helps. Okay, so our next question is also from Paul, and Paul wants to know how many hours of filming and how many hours of editing go into every minute of the final product. As a rough approximation, I would say anywhere from 2 to 3 hours of filming usually goes into a vlog. So a 15 to 25 minute long vlog on the channel probably came from about 2 to 3 hours of filming that day. We try to do usually one vlog per day of a trip. And generally what happens is I'll take that 2 to 3 hours of footage into the timeline. I'll make a string out edit of all the usable content that's usually about an hour long. And it takes me about 3 to 4 hours to make that. Now, if I wanted to, I could simply upload that to YouTube, call it done, and share it. However, that doesn't personally challenge me as a filmmaker or a storyteller. And so, as somebody who really wants to hone their craft and refine that down to a really compelling story with energy and pacing, like I love doing that, and the process of editing it down to something more refined. That's what ends up taking weeks sometimes, and putting lots of little details into the edit. Some of our more detailed videos, it can sometimes take months, and then it ends up taking a little more time than I care to admit per minute of finished video. Please don't tell Julia. Julia's probably watching this and being like, oh my God. Now, it can get really crazy sometimes. I have sometimes, for example, spent an entire day just working on a few seconds of video. Like for the scrunning video that we did where Julia was running down the mountain, I was trying to do something that was really new and different at the time. I was trying to film with a gimbal on the end of a counterweighted boom pole, And then I was rotoscoping After Effects tracking points in post, taking tracking points off of things that would throw the stabilization off. So I was rotoscoping points out. That video was filmed at 60 frames per second, and I was spending probably about 30 seconds per frame of video. And when you figure there are 60 frames per second of video in that particular video, you can very quickly see how it was taking hours, if not sometimes the entire day, to do just a few seconds of video for that particular video. So way more time than I care to admit went into that particular video. But as a rough approximation, usually about 2 to 3 weeks for a 15-minute vlog. I love to hone my storytelling craft, and just a lot of energy goes into pacing and creating energy and refining the narrative and all those little details that go into making it special. It requires a lot more time to do that, and that I'm not as consistent as I should be with my uploads, and that I don't have as much watch time on the videos, but that's what I love to do. Now on to another controversial or seemingly controversial topic in the backcountry when it comes to camping. What filtration system should you use for your water? And I should start out by saying, again, as we talked about in the previous video about what footwear you should wear in the backcountry, your water purification system is really highly dependent on your particular way of backcountry camping or tripping. I think what I've come to recognize is the reason why so many people feel so strongly or passionately about their particular way of doing it is because their way of doing it helps facilitate their way of camping. If you're the kind of person who loves to get to a campsite and then spend 2, 3, 4 days at the same campsite, then something like a gravity filter approach to filtering your water is a fantastic way of doing it. And you can just sort of set it and forget it, and you're not making all these trips down to the water with your water pump, or you're not constantly boiling water. And so I can totally see how a gravity filter works in that kind of tripping. However, for Julie and I, who like to do longer days in the park, and we love to see what's around the corner, and we would rather not spend as many days at the same campsite in a row, something like a Katadyn Hiker Pro works really well for us because it's very nimble, and it's something that we can just keep at the top of the food barrel, and as we're paddling along, if we need more water, we can just pop it out, and we can pump as much as we need just for, say, a portage. We don't have to fill up both of our water bottles. We can just fill up one and then do a portage so that we're not carrying more weight. So yeah, look for a method that helps facilitate your particular style of camping, and don't let anybody tell you that one particular way is the absolute best, because everybody trips differently, and what works for you might not work for somebody else, and what works for somebody else might not work for you. We all just need to get along. I'm going to wrap it up there, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I have a ton more topics and questions that I'd like to answer, but I don't want these videos to get completely out of hand and super long, so I think I'm going to wrap it there. It's currently 4 a.m. in the morning, and it is definitely time for me to go to bed, but I really do want to maintain a dialogue with you folks while I'm working on the Meanest Link documentary, and I hope you enjoy these. The sponsors also help support the channel, so I hope you understand, and yeah, clicking on that link in the description and checking out the folks at Skillshare with a free trial really does help out the channel, so I'd appreciate it if you could please take a look, and be safe, be kind to others, be kind to yourself. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.